The sky ripped open above Europe. One moment my bomber held steady. The next, tracer fire tore through the fuselage, the right engine coughing flame. The cockpit filled with smoke and the stench of burning oil. A red light blinked, then died. "Mayday, mayday," I shouted, but only static answered. My co-pilot bailed out behind me. I didn't see him go, just felt the aircraft jerk lighter and wrong. The altimeter spun like a clock gone mad. I pulled the canopy release, and the wind swallowed the rest of the world. For a heartbeat, I was weightless, then the parachute yanked open, tearing the breath from my lungs. Below stretched endless snow. A dark line of forest, a frozen river, and scattered rooftops, too far from the front, too deep in enemy territory. I hit the ground hard, rolled through crusted snow, and came up on one knee, pain flaring through my leg. My chute flapped like a white flag in the open field. I clawed it down, dragging it under branches, every sound too loud in the silence that followed battle. Footsteps broke that silence. Two figures approached through the trees, a man and a girl, both wrapped in thick wool coats. He held an axe, she carried a basket. They stopped a few paces away, staring at my uniform. I raised empty hands. "British pilot," I said. "No weapons." They didn't understand, but the girl stepped closer, eyes bright with fear and curiosity. She pointed at my knee, then called softly to the man. He hesitated, glanced at the sky, engines still echoed faintly above, then motioned for me to follow. We moved through the forest, the snow muffling our steps. My knee throbbed, but I kept pace. Ahead, hidden under frost-covered pines, stood a small wooden hut with smoke rising from a crooked chimney. Inside, the air was thick with the smell of wood smoke and potatoes. The man gestured for silence and whispered a single word I would learn quickly: "Sitcho," quiet. The girl helped me sit by the stove. She tore strips from an old curtain and bound my leg. Her hands were cold but steady. I tried to thank her. She only smiled, shy and serious. The man pressed a cup into my hands, some bitter homemade drink that burned its way down. He watched the door, every muscle tense. When an engine roared overhead, he slid open a panel in the wall, revealing a narrow crawl space. He pointed. I understood. I crawled inside, pressed between wood and dirt, the smell of earth and fear in my throat. Above, boots thudded on the ground, then faded. When the panel opened again, the man looked at me, his face lit only by the fire. He tapped his chest. Joseph, then the girl's shoulder. "Zofia." He pointed to me, waiting. "James," I whispered. Joseph nodded. "Daba's James." Outside, the forest creaked in the wind. Inside that hut, three strangers shared a silence that could cost them everything. By morning, the forest was silent again. The only sound was the wind pushing powder through the trees like drifting smoke. Joseph was already outside, splitting wood with slow, deliberate swings. Zofia stirred something thick in a pot on the stove. The smell of cabbage and smoke made my stomach twist. When she noticed me awake, she handed me a tin cup of water and bread so hard it could break a tooth. I chewed anyway, nodding thanks. She pointed at my knee, then at the door. "Time to move." We left before sunrise, cutting north through the woods. Joseph carried a small rifle wrapped in canvas. I limped behind, clutching a stick for balance. He'd explained nothing, but the direction said enough, away from the crash site, away from the men who'd be searching the fields for a parachute and a pilot. A plane droned far above. We stopped, listening. It passed over, unseen behind the clouds. Joseph muttered Nimsi, then spit into the snow. "Germans." We reached a clearing where a small church stood half-collapsed under winter weight. Its bell hung sideways, silent. Inside, sunlight spilled through broken, stained glass, coloring the frost. Joseph whispered something to Zofia, then turned to me. "Sitcho," he said again, then pointed to a ladder leading down into a cellar. I hesitated. He nodded firmly. I went. Below was a root cellar turned into something else, stacked firewood, sacks of potatoes, and a hidden door behind a wall of crates. Zofia brushed snow from my shoulders and handed me a wool coat that smelled of hay and smoke. Then she smiled briefly before climbing back up. The space beyond the crates was small and dark. A cot, a candle stub, a blanket. Someone had built it long before me, for hiding or surviving, maybe both. When they returned at dusk, Joseph carried a small tin marked with a red cross. Partisan, he said, tapping his chest, then mine. You Raf, he mimed a plane, hands swooping then crashing. I nodded. He smiled, proud of his English. Zofia unwrapped the bandage on my knee, cleaned it carefully, and replaced it. Better, she said softly. Her accent stretched the word until it sounded almost like a prayer. That night, while the fire whispered in the stove, Joseph unfolded a worn map and traced lines between rivers and towns. He pointed west. Warsaw. Too far. You hide, then he pointed east. Forest people. Safe maybe. Maybe was good enough. We heard shouting outside not long after. Men's voices, sharp, practiced. Dogs. Zofia's face went white. Joseph pushed me toward the trapdoor. I slid inside without a sound. Above me, boots crunched snow. German. Close. They asked questions I couldn't understand. Joseph answered calm, his voice even. Something crashed, a chair maybe, then silence. After a long moment, the door slammed. The dogs barked once and were gone. When he finally lifted the hatch, Joseph's hands shook. His eyes said what words couldn't, that silence had just saved all our lives. 2 nights later, Joseph woke me with a touch on the shoulder. Move, he whispered. Zofia was already packed, shawl pulled tight, eyes wide in the lamplight. We left the cabin without a word. The forest was darker than I remembered. Snow drifted from the branches in slow, soft falls. Joseph led with his rifle across his back. Zofia followed, and I limped behind, each step biting my knee. We reached a frozen river at dawn. Steam rose from cracks in the ice where water whispered beneath. Joseph crouched, studying the tracks on the bank. Boots many. He looked up sharply, motioning us down. Across the river, torchlight flickered between trees. Patrols. We waited. I counted heartbeats, breaths, snowflakes. When the light vanished, Joseph motioned us onward. The ice groaned beneath our weight. Halfway across, it cracked like a gunshot. I froze, breath caught. Joseph held up his hand, stay still, then shuffled forward, spreading his weight. I copied him inch by inch. The river complained but didn't break. On the far side, Zofia grabbed my sleeve and pointed. A shape lay in the snow, a soldier's body, half buried, one hand clutching a frozen photograph. His uniform was German. Joseph knelt, searching his coat for anything useful. Rations, a knife, dry matches. Then he closed the man's eyes and whispered something under his breath. We walked until we reached a cluster of barns beside a ruined road. Smoke rose faintly from one chimney, too faint for comfort. Joseph signaled for silence and crept ahead. After a few minutes, he waved us in. Inside, a group of men sat around a lantern, partisans. Their coats were mismatched, faces hollow, eyes burning with the kind of hunger that wasn't just for food. Joseph spoke quickly, pointing to me. I caught only a few words, Anglic pilot help. The leader, a thick man with a scar through his eyebrow, looked me over. Then he nodded once. Tomorrow move west. Bridge. You go home. Home. The word hit like a blow. That night, Zofia brought me a cup of soup and sat beside me on the hay. You go soon, she said quietly. I nodded. You'll be safe here. She smiled, small, uncertain. Safe, she echoed, then looked away. The firelight caught in her hair, turning it to strands of silver. For a moment, I forgot the war. Joseph appeared at the doorway. "Sleep," he said. "Tomorrow, danger." I lay down but didn't close my eyes. Through the cracks in the wall, I watched the snow fall again, each flake erasing the ones before. Somewhere beyond the river, men searched for me. Somewhere ahead, maybe, was home. And somewhere in between, I realized I had stopped being lost. Dawn came with gunfire. The partisans were already moving before I'd fastened my boots. Joseph thrust a pistol into my hand. "Only if you must," he said. His eyes looked older in the gray light. We slipped through the forest toward the road. Somewhere ahead was the bridge, the one the Germans used to move supplies east. If we reached it, they said, I might find the resistance route back to Allied lines. Might was a prayer now, not a plan. Snow fell heavy, muffling the sound of boots. Zofia kept close, carrying a satchel of food and bandages. When she looked at me, it was with the quiet knowledge that every step could be the last one we shared. The bridge appeared through the fog, steel and frost, guarded by trucks and a checkpoint. Joseph whispered with the leader, a man called Merck. They spread out, setting charges beneath the near end. The goal was simple: draw the Germans east, send me west. I waited in a ditch beside Zofia. My breath fogged the air. She reached into her pocket and pressed something into my hand, the brass button from my flight jacket, the one she'd found when patching my knee. "For luck," she said. Before I could answer, the first explosion tore the bridge's edge apart. Flames clawed upward, echoing across the valley. German shouts filled the air. Merck's men opened fire, short and sharp. Joseph grabbed my arm. Now, we ran. Across the road, through a line of trees split by machine gun fire. The world blurred into white and smoke. Behind us, the bridge thundered as another blast tore it wider. I stumbled once, nearly fell. Zofia's hand caught my sleeve and pulled. When the noise finally broke into silence, the air was thick with ash. The bridge burned behind us, a black skeleton over the frozen river. Merck's men were gone, some scattered, some not. Joseph's face was streaked with soot, his rifle empty. He looked west, then at me. "Go," he said. "What about you?" He shook his head. "We stay. You fly again." Zofia's eyes filled, but she didn't cry. She stepped closer, lifted the scarf from her neck, and tied it around mine. "Warm," she whispered. I wanted to tell her something that would mean enough. Thank you, goodbye, sorry, but the words tangled in my throat. So I just nodded and stepped back. They turned toward the smoke, rifles in hand. I turned toward the horizon. For a long moment I stood there, one man, one direction, the scarf still warm with her breath. Then I started walking, the snow closing behind me like a curtain. The snow carried me west. My legs were numb, the scarf stiff with frost, breath rising in short white clouds. Each step felt borrowed. At dusk I found a ruined farmhouse and built a fire in a broken stove. The warmth came slow, smoke curling through cracks in the roof. I took the brass button from my pocket, the one Zofia had given back, and turned it in the firelight. It shone dull and gold, a small piece of another life. I thought of them, Zofia, Joseph, their faces fading into the smoke behind the bridge. They had risked everything for someone they didn't know. That's what heroism really is, quiet, unseen, unrecorded. The scarf still held her scent of wood smoke and snow. I wrapped it around my hands and whispered the one Polish word I'd learned, "Sitcho," quiet. It filled the empty room like a prayer. At dawn I stepped outside. The world was white and still, but then I heard it, faint engines above the clouds. A single plane swept low, sunlight glinting off its wings. I waved the scarf until my arm burned. The pilot dipped once in answer, then vanished north. Days later, Allied soldiers found me. They gave